Go. Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer. Michael Wann is here, and Michael, it's our Sweet 16. The Playing the Glass Bead game, episode number 16 is upon us.
Am I losing my mind? I thought that last week I said it was the Sweet 16. You're like, no, it's 17. You missed it. You must have told me 15. Did you tell me 15 last week?
Last week was Project Kids because we still once a month do a Project Kids because that's like the public show, right? So we were at 17 for Project Kids and we're at 16 right now for Playing the Glass Bead game. We caught up very quickly because we play the glass bead game every week, pretty much.
So this is going to tie in perfectly with what I want to talk about today, because it is becoming harder and more difficult to understand where we are in time space world. And I don't think and this is the thing which is so interesting. It's like, we've always been exactly where and when we are. It's like, we wouldn't be all Buddhist about it, be like, we're in the present moment. But regardless, it is really, really, really getting hard to know where things are. Oh, we're on 16 here and 17 there and all these different things. And it's like, it's getting more and more difficult to when consciousness, lock yourself down to, okay, this is the time, this is the place. And so as opposed to the idea of needing to know that, because I think that's part of it, myself and all human beings, is we want a point of reference to understand what's going on. All of these points of references of how we understand the time and place of things, it's all it's melding, and it, on one level, I think it's disorienting. I'm disoriented by the numbers of our shows, but at the same time, it's also freeing. So maybe we could talk about some of those topics today, because it is a weird time out there right now, my friends.
I've always found time to be rather anomalous, right? It doesn't seem one of the things that just popped to my mind while you were talking that doesn't make sense is how space is evenly divided and defined everywhere in terms of if I if somebody lives down a quarter mile down the street from me, they don't say they live in the same place as me, right? Oh, that's a quarter mile away. But within a few hundred, sometimes even a few thousand miles, it's the same time. So time is in zones. So I don't understand how a person could live 500 miles away from me, but be at the same place in time that I am. Right? Because the way time moves in increments depending on which time zone you're in, but there's no breakdown of how time moves within the zones, right? Within a minute, there are seconds. So even if you're on the same minute, if you look further into the time, the seconds are defined, right? But how can it possibly be that it's the exact same time for me here as it is for somebody in East Texas? How is that possible? If the space is different, how is the time not different? Because it's really metered in the same way, but we don't acknowledge it with time the way we do with space.
So, yeah, we're thinking a lot about similar things. Just recently, I've been getting away within my own in my own mind of time and space, and just thinking timing and spacing. It's all, everything is it's relative. It's relative. And then understanding that's a real thing, how we understand our experience is really how time is just relative to events. And the word time itself is so strange because it has multiple meanings, but rarely do we think about the difference of those meanings, time being it's 10:30 a.m. That's time. But time also refers to the lag between events. That's really what time is. It's the lag between events. And it's just recognizing that everything's not occurring simultaneously, even though we're told it is. I don't actually experience it that way. But space is the same thing too. It's we only know where we are in physical reality based upon these markers of okay, well, I'm a quarter mile away from you, but if there wasn't any you, where am I? And so as this is being when that's solid or settled, it's still all fake, but we all agree upon this is our point of reference to understanding things. As that's changing, as the puppet masters are changing that, it creates a disorientation. So it's and this this is good. This is perfect setup. Thank you, Emily. So I'm just going to use this as an analogy. So like in Aikido, like the whole idea with Aikido or any of a martial art like that, which is not necessarily about force, it's about being able to influence or move someone with as little effort as possible. And how that happens is you move someone off their center, like in their physical center. Once someone does not have that
Aikido, you mean the form of karate, Aikido?
The martial art, yes.
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah,
yes. So it's like, this is why like a small person is able to go and like influence someone who's much larger, physically stronger, is because when you're off your center, and I'm using this as an analogy, like it's very easy to like move someone. Like if you're like solid in your ground, I have to be strong enough to move you off that. But if you're like, don't have your center when you're in motion, I can easily like manipulate how you go. So that's the physical thing, or the physical example. The same thing is happening with consciousness right now, which is like when you get someone off of their like consciousness center. Okay, this is the time, this is the place. And when that shifts, well, then it's easier to like, change the way which people understand reality. And, this is how you go and you change consciousness, or like, the way people see reality. I'm always like, and I like to think about like specifically what a mind fuck the daylight savings is. Like, everyone feels discombobulated the day of daylight savings, whether you're going forward or backwards. What day is it? Like, it's gotten even stranger where you've got like some clocks are like automatically tell you the new time and some clocks don't. And then I'm always like, I don't know what time it is. I don't know what day it is. So, that's a really like, I don't think that's a technique. Because as I said before, like it's both freeing, because when we are solid, like, okay, this is the time or this is the place, you're grounded in that and you're limited to seeing reality that certain way. But then when it begins to shift, well, then, it opens up new things. So like, that's the good thing. But then the bad thing is when you don't understand like that's the nature of the human experience, and you don't understand that you're being manipulated, like the masses are being manipulated by like your points of references are changing. This is part of like rewriting history, rewriting that is you don't have like this point of reference. Like, that's how you're able to go and manipulate large groups of people without their understanding. So that being said, I want to talk about the Olympics for a second, because I saw this and it blew my mind.
Okay, 1 second. Before you do, I just want to ask you a question.
All right.
Couple of things. So one of the things that I do, have you like, whether your phone updates correctly or not, like I have this thing that no matter what, I always seem to look at my clock at my phone and it's 11:11. Whether that's the right time for where I am or not, I still look at it when it's 11:11, right? And I think on a certain level, the fact that everyone carries around this time device and they're not all tuned similarly, like that's the coordinate or the axis point or the fulcrum that each person is tuned to. Right. So whether it is not like whether it's actually the time it is when you're looking at it or not, the phone is generating the timeline that you're sort of living by. Right. And that's why, I know people who never wore watches, myself included, who generally almost always have a phone with them unless we're making a specific decision to not have a phone with us. Right. So it's interesting the way we become anchored to a timeline or an axis point that generates time from it, whether it be accurate or not. Right. So that's kind of interesting. But I'm also curious, have you ever had the experience of like thinking it's either a different day or a different time than it is? And what I'm saying, when I say that, I don't mean like, okay, like your clock is wrong. Well, that could be your clock is wrong. I don't mean it's like, you got confused or like you looked at a clock that was the wrong time or that you just forgot what day it was. Like one of the weirdest experiences I ever had in my life was my very first go around with drugs. Like the first time, like it was with the crack cocaine back in the 90s, right? Like I had stayed up, like, I don't know what that, I went on much larger benders later on in my life, but I think the first time I ever stayed up for like maybe 2 days or 3 days or something like that, I'd gotten home and I think I finally went to sleep at like 4 o'clock in the morning. Right. And I had been to sleep at 4 o'clock in the morning. And while you might sleep a little bit later than normal, you would generally, I would wake up, sometimes still the next morning, or maybe at the latest, like noon or something like that. Right. But whatever this had done to my body, now in hindsight, like it's entirely possible something else was going on, because at this point I hadn't realized about being taken out yet or missing time or anything that was going on with my life. But I literally seemed to sleep a whole 24 hours and woke up in the morning the following day and didn't know it. And it took me until like halfway through the day when I realized that I had missed a day. Have you ever had that experience?
No.
Not
like that. But I think that's real. Like if you could imagine what it's like if you don't have time, if you don't have like this thing telling you what day it is or what time it is. Like I've been thinking, like, this is so funny we're having this conversation, because this has been like circulating in my mind for the last like 48 hours. There's no such thing as Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But it is a real thing. Like we're using it in the point of reference, but to coordinate our times, but it's not a real thing. When that goes away, like what would that do for us? And what you're talking about is like you escape that, and you were able to escape that, like maybe through drug use, but like through that experience of like totally getting disconnected from that, like you're able to like tap into like that no time zone, or at least a time zone which is not part of the twilight zone.
Okay. So you know what it did for me, and this is like super interesting, right? So what it did is, okay, so I didn't, with days they're a little different than time, because based on how light or dark it is outside, you have a general idea of what time it is.
Mm-hmm.
You miss a whole day and you wake up at what would seem like morning, but you don't realize you've missed a whole day, right? Unless you are going to school or someplace where the date is prominently, right? You don't know until someone brings awareness to you that you were out of the game for a day, right? So what happened for me is I didn't know that I had missed a day. There was nobody else at home. So nobody was like, you've been sleeping for a long time or whatever. When I woke up, there was nobody else at home, right? So early in the afternoon, I went to work and I just wandered in, and people were like, what the fuck are you doing? I'm like, what do you mean I'm done work? You weren't here yesterday. So I didn't wander in with like a guilty conscience because I had missed work the day before, because I didn't know that I had missed work, right? So it was like it took a minute to sort of sort out what had happened. And I was so shocked by it that I didn't look guilty. And so people were like, okay, like it was weird in a different way. And it's not something I had done before. So it was very disorienting, not only for me, but for everybody else. Right. And it threw the entire structure of things completely out of order. Right. Because not only generally, if somebody misses work, you know what to do. And to do is to be mad at them, to suspend them, to fire them, to write them up or whatever. But when someone genuinely looks like absolutely baffled as to what you are talking about, like it's hard to be mad. So not only did I disrupt the structure by not being there for work, but I disrupted the normal behavior, the way people handle certain situations. Right. And it generated like a certain amount of chaos. Right. And just think about like just the fact that one small thing generated that much chaos in an organization. Right. And that if this stuff was happening on a regular basis, how hard would it be for control systems to maintain their control?
God, I mean, well, so a couple things there are three things I want to say. So remind me to come back and bring up my phone story from the month of May.
Okay.
The first thing I want to say is like, I think you just pointed out like a truth in terms of like the shared experience and the controlled universal experience. And what that is when one person, like, when there is the addition of something that does not make sense into like the shared understanding of time, like it can deconstruct everyone else's understanding of reality. And that's where the problem happens. And so it is when you came in, regardless of the detail being like you generally, you lost that day and you weren't feeling guilty about it because you were unaware. You weren't like, there was no shame, because we know how shame plays into the system. So what that does is like, that impacts or affects like everyone else. And we can see how one person can go and like, make the house of cards fall down. And so the way which that does not happen. So like, let's take that away from just being like, this instance of I missed work and what that does for people, like that being ideas, like, the true definition of what a meme is. Like when meme was first, came about, like it's a mind virus. So when people were beginning to introduce new perspectives or ideas of understanding the story we know as history, like that would be the exact same sort of thing what you're explaining, but just purely of an idea. Like, no, that's not how history happened. Like there was this event and this event, and so what you do is you have to make that predictable in the collective mind. And you make that predictable by saying, this is what that's called. That's called a conspiracy theory. And the people who have conspiracy theories are these right here. So that when you run across it, when I'm saying that, I'm saying I'm referring to like the regular mind person who's supposed to be mainstream thinking. You have the box to be able to be inoculated against that, so that it doesn't get you out of like the controlled system of mind, of time, of spacing, and all of that sort of stuff. So like that, I think that's probably one of the most dangerous things, to controlling the masses, is being certain to keep whatever it may be, because there's infinite ways, like anything which could go and get someone to see things from a different perspective and realize that they're not seeing it from like a perspective, just thinking it's just the way it is. Like that is the ultimate cure or escape from like the prison, the mind prison. So, and that's why that's why it's so powerful. And then while it's like all of those things, and it's disorienting to people too, just as what we're describing.
So the other thing that's interesting about this is, in all my years of drug use after that, far more drug use, staying up for weeks at a time, it never happened again, right? I never had something like that happen again. But what's so interesting is, I would say from that point in time, like, my life came off of its track. The day that I missed the day, my life came off of the trajectory that it seemed to be going, because I had fallen out of sync with that time, with that timeline. And I never made my way back to that timeline, for better or for worse, or for, I don't even know if that shit matters, right? But that seems to dislodge me, even though there had been some problems and some chaos going on in my life that may have led up to that. That seems to be the event that really took me out of sync with everybody else.
Right.
Set me on this other path where I'm, living sort of on the margins, kind of, as you are on a certain level, right? In terms of like, we walk this fine line between, between what's considered societally acceptable and what's not, right?
And this ties in, I think, exactly to the conversation we're having before we start recording about like, general shadow banning. Like normally we think about shadow banning in this very like kind of like maybe specific way, like maybe a specific comment or a specific video that may be shadow banned, but like you being shadow banned in general from an entire like group of people who like through all of the different interactions, all the different platforms of the internet. And so like, once someone has been identified as, not so much just limited to the information which they're sharing, like the specific piece, but their general viewpoint of reality, like that has to be separated and pulled away. And the reason we're talking about that, because the folks at home, they don't know what our conversation was. We're talking about people who we know who are unable. They're like, hey, I searched for, I've been looking for you on the internet for years. I could never find you. I'm like, I'm all over the place. I don't know how you cannot find me unless there is like, some sort of like, you said it yourself, like, you once you made that first post, you said you made a post, and ever since that, like you have been anything which you put out afterwards had been invisible to all of your regular relationships. Like, there's this like how they built into the mechanism of the digital system is to keep anyone or any ideas separated from those who are still part of that timeline, that mind line, like whatever we want to go and use to keep like that universal mind.
Yep.
Yeah, that's that. And that's what I think and, let's go back to like playing the glass bead or the glass bead game and like the sort of things which we're doing. It's like, it's not so much, or like what you and I are doing or what other people are doing, particularly those who come about it in a playful way. Is like it's breaking out of that system of thought or being in the this is the way things are, and it's teaching how to get out of it, which is why it's both so freeing and then maybe also so dangerous for those who don't want someone breaking out of that system.
And you want to know, just to add the cherry on top of the Sunday, do you want to know where I was working when this happened?
Where were you working?
Monarchs Gymnastics.
There you go.
Right.
So I want to go back to one more thing. This is a funny little anecdote, and perhaps you remember this. So you and I, we text, right? We've texted, for over a year now. We have that relationship. Had you ever realized that, like, I would send you a response to one of your texts, and in the timeline on your phone where it lists the order of text, like mine they seem to be going backwards. Like, you would have to scroll up.
Yeah, I've had that. I wouldn't say I have it every time, but I have had that experience before. Yes.
With me specifically.
Yes.
So there was something with my phone. And this is going on for years. Like the timing, the clock on my phone, because I'm bringing this up because you brought up about like the 11:11.
Right.
So how phones should like theoretically like work is that it gets a signal from wherever your phone, like whatever network it is, and like embedded in that is going to be a time, and everyone who's on that network, and I think it's going to go even deeper than that, like everyone's on the same time, like we're all using the same thing. But for whatever reason, for a couple of years, my phone was 10 minutes behind everyone else's. I could change the time on my clock. It didn't matter. Like, on my phone, I could change it. Like I was always 10 minutes late. And so the reason I brought up the text is like, that's how it would show itself, like in actual like reality. Like I'd respond to, like, you would send me a text, like 4 texts at like 12:02, and I'll respond immediately afterwards, but it's time date stamped at 11:45. So my response would come before yours.
Right.
And so that's just like, I always thought that was funny. I was like, and I would like laugh at myself. Like, I don't understand why, but they got me on a different timeline. Like I'm 10 minutes slower than everyone. So then like one day out of nowhere, this is like May, this is early May. This was this past May, my phone, and I got an old phone. Like I don't want to get known. I got an old car. I got an old phone. I don't like, I don't want any of the new shit. So like I got an old phone, and all of a sudden, like it just starts like vibrating like nonstop. It wasn't like kind of like it's locked in this vibration. I'm like, what the fuck's going on? Try to turn it off. Nothing would happen. The only way I could stop it was I took the battery out of the phone, and then I put the battery back in. And the phone, the talking aspect seemed to work fine, but all of a sudden, like all browser capabilities were gone. And like, I know a little bit about like how like all this shit works. So like I'm going in and trying to reconfigure, and whatever I would do, like I just didn't have any browser. I didn't have any internet. I'm like, all right, I'm cool with that. In fact, I really like that, to like the disappointment of a lot of people in my lives. Like I like not being able to be contacted. I like not being able to be texted. So I was cool with that. And so for the entire month of May, after this like vibrating phone, I didn't have text, but I didn't have browser. I was able to receive texts. I could respond to a text, but there would be no record of anything I wrote on a text. So I could go and look at a past like conversation, and I could see everything which Emily would say to me, but anything I wrote back was gone. But my time, all of a sudden I was on the right timeline. So I'm like, this is all weird sort of shit. So this was going on in May, and I'm looking at this from like, how does the technology work, to like, what sort of dimension am I in? All this sort of shit. June 1 comes. June 1, everything reset on my phone. And then all of a sudden, everything was correct. And I'm like, what just happened? Like now.
Hey guys, it's Emily, and you just watched the opening clip from episode number 16 of Playing the Glass Bead Game with myself and Michael Wann. This episode was sort of a time special, particularly in regards to timelines, disorientation and reorientation in time, crossing over time. We got into all sorts of interesting things. We talked a bit about the Olympics. We talked a bit about time running in opposite directions. We got into a new book to add to our pile that seems interesting, but mostly it was about temporal fuckery. So it was a really good one. If you would like to view the whole episode, you can join us at patreon.com/Off-Planet Media. Join at the Project Kids level for all of that content and the interactive experiences that go along with it. If you are interested in the content only, you can become a supporter at projectkids.locals.com, or you can reach out to me by email for a single episode. If you have not received a complimentary episode yet and you'd like one, feel free to reach out. Or if you would like a free day at the Project Kids Social Club to see the way we play the game there, you can get that by emailing me as well. All right. Hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. We will see you real soon. Bye-bye.